my name is Charly Lester. Welcome to 5 key lessons for marketing to over 50s. So just to introduce myself to you, here I am looking far more glamorous. Back in the days when we could go to a hairdresser and get our hair done. In case you hadn't been, I guess you were guessing that I was doing this video from lockdown. Right, so I was former CMO of Lumen. I spent the last 2 years at Lumen, which was a dating app for over 50s, which I launched with my co-founder Antoine. We were the first ever dating app to target the over 50 demographic with just a dating app. So treating over 50s like they use smartphones and like they use apps, which we all know they do. Over the years, people have created dating websites for this age group, but really treated this age group like they don't know how to use smartphones. And we knew that wasn't the case. So we created something really modern, and we had a lot of fun with our marketing. So as Chief Marketing Officer, I've been marketing in the dating space for about 6-7 years now. This is the first time I worked with the over 50s demographic, but I learned a lot of lessons in the last 2 years, and I just wanted to share some of them with you guys today, because I think we can really improve the way that all businesses speak to this age group. Okay, so to kick things off, over 50s feel underrepresented. Now, we did a survey, a global survey, maybe about 6 months ago, and found that 85% of over 50s don't feel like they're represented when it comes to media, to film, to advertising, to TV shows. And actually, if you think about it, if you look at those TV shows, it's very rare that the main character will be over 50. Quite often they kind of play these really sort of small parts in a TV show or in a film. Everyone seems really focused on millennials these days, which is a real shame, because actually when you look at this age group, there's so many people in this age group. We're all going to get into that age group if we're not in it already. And this age group has a lot of freedom, a lot of buying power. Quite often the person who holds the purse strings for a household is actually a woman who's over 50. And people seem to forget that. So one of the key things I believe for marketing to this age group is to make sure that you understand them and show that you want to represent them and that you want to see more of them. So off the back of that research, this was the ad campaign that we came up with. Over 50s should never be made to feel invisible. And I mean, the lesson of this is that you really shouldn't have to get naked to make people see you. But we had a lot of fun with this campaign. And over 50s really responded really well to this, because they liked the fact that we were showing them, we were representing them, showing them as they really are, but also showing them as being quite sexy and cool. And we'll talk in a second about the misrepresentation of this age group. So it's really important to us to make this age group feel empowered, and really do something really eye-catching. Now, this is a global campaign, and this actually got a lot of attention in the US, in the UK, and in Australia. We did individual ads to go alongside the campaign, and there you go, there's some of the individual ads, which, yeah, I think the whole point was to be campaigning against this issue that over 50s, should feel sexy, and should feel represented. And should be seen. And that's my co-founder Antoine. I think he was in Miami at the time with one of our posters. Okay, lesson number 2. Over 50s don't feel properly represented, basically. And the reason for this is the stock imagery about over 50s. If you look at most of the stock imagery of over 50s, it's people in their 70s or 80s. Quite often it'll be like a retired couple in a hammock on a beach. And that just does not represent most of the people I know who are over 50. I mean, if you think over 50 can literally be from a day after your 50th birthday right up to 100, right? That's 50 years, there's no way that you would group a newborn with a 50-year-old. So why would you group a 50-year-old with someone who's 100 or someone who's 90? And so I think it's really important to make sure that you show people who look like the people you're trying to target. So if your product is for people in their 50s and 60s, don't show people in their 70s and 80s, and actually really think about it, because I think our perceptions of the age 50 have got so much younger in recent years. Lots of people in their 50s go to the gym really regularly. They live their lives far more similarly to people in their 30s and 40s than they do to people in their 70s and 80s, right? They've probably got kids living at home. They still go to work full time. They exercise regularly. And you really need to represent that in your imagery. So this is one of the first photo shoots that we did for Lumen. This lady, she actually was my next door neighbour. She's now 53. I mean, she does look really young, but she's not a model. She's a teacher, right? She's a teacher in her 50s. not a legal advisor. We did change her name for the advertising campaign, and her occupation. I think it's really important to actually show people who genuinely, people who are that age, and think really careful about it and make sure that you have as much diversity as possible. This is one of our latest campaigns. This is a campaign that showed 50 is just the start, right? And I love the fact that actually the lady in the middle, Edwina, is the perfect embodiment of this, because she started running marathons age 50. She's now in her mid-70s. She is the UK's oldest female Ironman. For those of you who don't know what an Ironman is, it's a really long triathlon. I've done a few myself. It's 2.4 mile swim, 112 mile bike ride, followed by a marathon. And her finishing time is hours quicker than mine. She's amazing. She's in her 70s. We've got Dilys, who is a skydiver. She is 86 or 87 perhaps now. Only stopped skydiving a year ago when she realised that she couldn't get out of backflips quick enough, and she's getting a bit worried. It's an incredible lineup of people, and we really wanted to, with this campaign, actually just show you how active over 50s are. So the surfer is in her early 50s. I think as an age group, they're really fed up of being shown as very static and stale and boring, because with marketing, you need someone to feel like your product or your service is for them. You need to show them that you understand them. So if you're portraying over 50s living these very sedentary lives and acting like their lives are over, well, that doesn't represent a lot of the over 50s that are out there, particularly the sort of younger end of the demographic. But actually, this tattooist, Doc, he's in his late 80s, right? And he's not stopping anytime soon when it comes to seizing life. So you need to really represent that. Here are some of the posters that we did of those guys. I quite like the fact that we used Dilys, the skydiver, that's High Life magazine in British Airways. So she was, I quite like the idea of having a skydiver in an airplane magazine. Okay, lesson number 3, over 50s feel patronised. And I think this really is about the tone in which you speak to these over 50s. They are not dead. They have not stopped understanding stuff. And I think that this is a really important lesson for marketeers, particularly if you don't actually sit within that demographic. One of the things that we realised very early on is that over 50s have the same sense of humour that we do, and they like cheeky stuff and they want to feel sexy. So this was one of our actually very early campaigns, a really successful one of ours. I created a sexy Santa. This, I'm not going to lie, this tagline does not work in America, where it means something completely different. But in the UK, it's a cheeky, sexy caption. We spent very little money. We did this all in-house. We spent very little money on this campaign. I think probably like less than £3,000 total for the whole thing. And it got us more coverage internationally than anything else for a good year. Only topped by Ulrike Johnson, who was our Mrs. Claus the following year, again looking really sexy, and she, I think, is 52 or 53. Someone who's lived their love life in the public eye, wanted to be made to feel sexy. She loved these images. And it's really good to see someone who actually, if someone who has been in the public eye doesn't necessarily have a lot of self-confidence and actually really enjoyed being made to feel really sexy and like a sex symbol. And I think that that's how you need to treat this age group, right? They have a sense of humour. They think about sex and about appearance in the same ways that anyone in their 20s and 30s and 40s does, right? It doesn't change. You don't stop being the same person. And I think if you can tap into the stuff, if you're a younger marketer, if you can tap into the stuff that is important to you, they will have a variant on that, right? Like, yes, their viewpoint might have changed, but they still care about those things. Over 50s are opinionated. I cannot stress this enough, right? You do need to involve this audience in your decisions, particularly if you're not in that audience. And something that we found as a startup, and so it was actually really hard to hire over 50s for certain roles, because obviously the nature of a career, by the time you're in your 50s, you're probably quite 50s or 60s, you'll be quite senior in your career. And actually as a startup, it was really hard. We didn't have those senior positions to hire people in. And we did try really actively to hire over 50s. And so if you don't have over 50s on your team, then make sure that you are talking to them, right? Have focus groups, have regular dialogue. Every ad that I created, I was running past initially my book club, who are all in their 60s and 70s, but also actual focus groups that we had started up. And I wanted to show you a couple of the adverts that we created. The first one is our first ever TV ad, which featured this amazing hip hop group in Atlanta. Flew all the way out to Atlanta, and these guys are all in their 60s and 70s. And I'm going to play it for you. Aren't they amazing? So that was the start of that 50 is just the start campaign. Again, showing how active these people are. But one of the things that we did was, so myself and my head of brand at the time, we flew out to Atlanta for a week and a half to film this. We did all the rehearsals with them. We brought the suits out from Latvia. It was all very complicated. Again, we did it in-house because we really enjoyed doing it in-house. But one of the key things about this was we spoke to those ladies, right? We made sure that what we were doing inspired them and they enjoyed it. And so many of them were single and really wanted to share their views. And actually, you know, I think if you can get brand fans through that, then that's amazing, right? So from a dating app perspective, one of the best things that we can have is people in the age group who would talk about being single at 50. When it comes from a PR perspective, something I was constantly being asked is, have you got case studies on this? And not just case studies of people who had met on the app, but actually case studies of people who are dating in their 50s and 60s and are happy to speak to a magazine or a TV show about the pitfalls of that and the realities. And actually, we got to know these ladies so much that actually we could call on them and say, look, the ladies who are divorced, would you mind? We've got a newspaper that wants to talk about being divorced and being single. And they became amazing advocates for the brand because they could see what we were doing and they see that we care about their age group and actually that we were listening to them. So I think that listening is really important. Here is our second ad. Again, a little bit of humour in this one. We know that over 50s have a sense of humour. A little bit of a Baywatch vibe to this one.
Dating apps today are all about heat. The flames of passion. A spark ignited. Here at Lumen, we believe it's just as sexy to keep you safe. Every single person is photo verified, meaning there is no risk of catfish. Lumen is the dating app, especially for over 50s. Join today.
And again, I mean, that was just an idea that I just had one afternoon when I realised that a lot of other dating apps are named after sort of flames and fire stuff. And we were, you know, we were the safest dating app, right? So Lumen photo verifies every single person before they can join, making it really safe. Safety is a big concern to this age group. Something that we realised really, really early on, and actually something that follows on quite nicely, because my fifth point is that over 50s are influenced by their children. So particularly when it comes to stuff like tech, right? If you're designing a tech product, then actually, you know, yes, you obviously need to convince your audience, but one of the ways to convince your audience sometimes is actually by convincing their adult children. Because, for example, with dating, people in their 30s and 40s have been the ones who had trailblazed with apps like Tinder 10 years ago, coming up to 10 years ago. And so they tested these products and then they were telling their parents about them. Partly one of the key things is someone that age who is single doesn't want to date on the same app as their mum or dad, which, you know, came of use to us. But you do need to really persuade the people who are perhaps more knowledgeable about your product that they should be, you know, helping their mum join, for example. So safety was really key, and that was actually one of the kind of main USPs of Lumen unique selling points is this safety aspect, because no other mainstream app makes you take a photo of yourself when you're signing up, and that extra layer of protection, which means that you can't have catfish on the app, it makes it very hard for scammers to be on the app, just makes the app more trustworthy, so that if you are an adult child, then you're more willing to put your parents on the app. And going back, I just realised one point that I would like to make, that I should have made earlier, when I was talking about over 50s feeling patronised, one of the first things we kept getting asked when we were creating this app is, are you going to be using large print on the app? And loads of people ask that. It's really patronising. You know, again, you know, I wear glasses, not actually for close up, but I'm 36 and I wear glasses. Don't just assume that all people over 50 suddenly have bad eyesight, right? It's such, you know, I think grouping people together is a really dangerous thing to do in marketing and product marketing. And so I think it's really important to think about stuff. That if anyone is wondering about font size on apps, if you have a problem with your eyesight, you when you use your phone, you actually, everything is enlarged. So you have a setting and the font of every app will adjust. So you don't need large font on an app if it's for over 50s, because the phone will do it for you anyway. Okay, so last slide. This was our first ever ad, and it's a little bit cheeky. I have to admit that the only complaints I got was that it just said mum and not dad, and the only reason for that is that actually we had dad on lorries. If anyone's ever advertised on the tube before, you'll know. If you have more than one design on the tube panels, it costs twice as much because they have to create 2 different slides. So we only had mum in tube cars. But again, this kind of cheeky, fun tone, right? And actually people quite enjoyed it. And what was really interesting is obviously the demographic using the tube is quite a bit younger. And something that we noticed was actually that people were registering around the country. They would get off the tube and they would... you know, it wasn't like we suddenly got a rush of downloads in London, even though we were only using this advert on the London tube. What would happen is obviously they'd get off the tube, get somewhere where they could text their parents or phone their parents, and then we were getting downloads all around the country. So this was actually serving its purpose, right? Suddenly, you know, perhaps single people in their 20s and 30s who were on Tinder were suddenly thinking, hey, well, you know, I would like my mum to date, but I don't want her on the same app as me, so maybe I can help her with that. It was a great way to get the name out. This was our very first ad, and also, I'll be completely honest, a great way for actually to get noticed by press. I think that tube advertising is a great way to really kind of announce yourself as a brand in London to the journalists. Every time that we did tube campaigns, I would get contacted by journalists. I think it's quite useful. Okay, that is my kind of whiz 5 lessons. I'm on Instagram and on Twitter at Ms. Charly Lester if anyone wants to contact me. And you can also reach out to me on LinkedIn if you've got any questions. These days I now freelance, so I'm doing freelance marketing. If anyone's interested in that, do give me a shout. Yeah, and I hope that that's been useful to you guys. Thanks ever so much.